The screech of metal wheels echoed through the tunnel as Halim gripped his laptop bag a little tighter, lowered his eyes to the floor, and took a deep breath. But there was still something he didn't know yet. Across from him, leaning against the subway door, Officer Jonas scanned the crowd. His eyes slid over every passenger for a split second, then, as if following some unspoken rule, stopped on Halim. His skin was a shade darker, his beard a bit too visible, his hoodie zipped up, the fear in the man's eyes. "ID check," Jonas said, voice flat and practiced, like he'd replayed this scene hundreds of times before. Halim lifted his head, trying not to make direct eye contact as he reached for his wallet, but just then, the door knocked. Not a real door this time. It was the loudspeaker chiming in over the crowd. "Please remain calm during police inspections." People glanced up for half a second, then dropped their eyes back to their phones. Nobody said a word. Nobody stepped in. Nobody asked why, but they hadn't seen the biggest surprise yet. As Halim handed over his ID, a thought cut through his mind. Me again. Always me. Because this wasn't the first time. On this line, on this route, at this hour, in this city, he was stopped almost every week. The blonde guy sitting next to him? Nothing. The woman in the business suit across the aisle? Not even a glance. Just him. But the really shocking thing was, not Jonas, but the way the second officer, Elena, was looking at him. Elena took Halim's ID and pulled up his file in the system, hesitating for a brief moment. The data on the screen was boringly normal. Halim Kara, 29, software engineer, resident in this country for 8 years. No criminal record, but Jonas shrugged, like none of that mattered, and pointed at Halim's bag. "Open your bag. All of it, now." Halim's throat tightened. "Why?" he asked, voice shaking. But when the phone rang, his life would change. His phone buzzed in his pocket. On the screen, Anna, his team lead from work, probably calling to remind him the meeting was in 10 minutes. He was supposed to present today, the big AI project he'd poured months of his life into. Now, on the subway, in front of everyone, stopped and searched yet again, just because of his skin color and beard. What would you do? "I said open your bag," Jonas repeated, stepping closer. The people around them shuffled back, a little circle forming. No one interfered, no one spoke. But everyone watched. That strong person was once this helpless too. Halim's fingers trembled as he pulled the zipper. He took out his laptop, his charger, a small notebook, and a pocket-sized copy of the Quran with English translation. Jonas's expression hardened instantly, his lips tightening into a thin, disapproving line. But there was still something he didn't know yet. "What's this?" Jonas asked, holding the book between two fingers like it might stain him. Halim wanted to say, "A holy book. What harm is that to you?" But the words got trapped in his throat. He knew it didn't matter what he said. Jonas had already made up his mind. The hidden stories of kindness in Halim's life, the times he'd helped strangers, didn't count for anything right now. And this is the moment where everything changed. In the back of the car, someone had been quietly watching. Mark, middle-aged, glasses, suit and tie, carrying a leather briefcase. The kind of regular European commuter who usually looked away in moments like this, kept his head down and minded his own business. But today was different. 2 months ago, when his young son had a panic attack on this very subway line, the only person who helped was Halim. Mark had barely had time to say thank you before rushing his son to the hospital, but he'd never forgotten the face of the man who had held his boy's hand, and now he realized it was the same man being searched in front of him. Just then, the door knocked again. This time it was real. The train was slowing into the station, brakes screeching. People shifted toward the exit, stressed about being late for work. Jonas was still digging through Halim's things. Elena was still staring at the screen. Halim's phone rang again. This time, he picked up with shaking fingers. When he answered the phone, Anna's voice came through, tense but worried. "Halim, the meeting's about to start. Are you okay? Are you still on the subway?" "I'm in a police check," he said, his lips barely able to form the words. Again, Anna thought silently. She'd heard this same excuse from him 3 times in the past months, but she hadn't seen the biggest surprise yet. "Tell me which station you're at," Anna said, her voice suddenly more determined. "I'll talk to our manager. We'll push the meeting. And you shouldn't have to go through this over and over, Halim." The crack in her voice was the cry of a heart trying to defend his dignity and identity. She was his colleague, sure, but first, she was a human being who could see the injustice. "You still haven't seen the biggest twist." Right then, Mark pushed through the crowd toward them. Normally, he'd avoid confrontation, especially with police, but his conscience refused to stay quiet this time. "Excuse me," he said to Jonas. "Why are you stopping him? Is he the only one in this car being checked?" "Routine check," Jonas replied with a thin, annoyed smile. The word routine hit Halim like a knife. He knew exactly what that routine meant. He'd been living inside that routine for years. The weight of loneliness pressed down on his shoulders again. "But hold on a second. Don't miss this detail." Mark continued, "I've been writing this line for 2 months now. I see this man all the time. He's calm, polite, always minding his own business. The day my son had a panic attack, he was the only one who helped us. I'm just a regular citizen, but if you ask me, there's something wrong with this routine." The energy in the car shifted. A few more passengers looked up. Some exchanged glances. A low murmur spread. Elena's face softened a little. Jonas tried to hide his anger. "Sir, don't interfere with our work," he snapped. But it was too late, because once the first person speaks up, once there's one witness willing to say, "This isn't right," something cracks. "You think what you're seeing now is big? It's nothing yet." The train stopped at the station. Jonas shoved Halim's ID back at him. "You can go," he said, but the sentence carried a threat inside it. "We'll see you again." Halim gathered his things, hands still shaking. He placed the book back into his bag gently. Mark took a step closer. "Let's get off together," he said. That simple offer shattered something inside Halim. Every other time he'd been stopped, he walked away alone, walked the station halls alone, swallowed his anger alone. Now, for the first time, someone said, "I'll walk with you." Out on the platform, Mark looked at him and said quietly, "This is the kind of injustice that could happen to any of us. It's just playing out on you today. What would you do?" Halim stopped, leaning against the wall for a moment, eyes closed. That night, when he finally made it home, he lay down on his bed. He covered his face with his hands. He prayed. His tears soaked into the pillow. Something invisible was carved into his heart. Then he made a decision, but he still didn't know one thing. You won't believe this, but he showed up late to work that day. He barely made it into the meeting room on time. No chance to fix his hair, no time to catch his breath. He stood in front of the big screen, where their months-long AI project was displayed. Ironically, his presentation topic was algorithmic bias, how AI models could discriminate based on race, gender, religion, and other sensitive traits. He grabbed the clicker, faced the room, and said, "Today I'm going to talk about bias in machine learning models. But I'm not just going to present a technical bug, because this is something that reaches into real life." But then the door knocked again. The back door of the meeting room opened slowly. Lisa from HR slipped in quietly, a folder in her hands. She sat in the back, saying nothing. Halim kept talking, but in his mind, one thought stuck. Why is HR here? Why now? On the screen, he flipped to a slide titled Routine Control Example. Under it, a made-up scenario. On a public transit line, the same type of people are consistently stopped every morning while going to work. He hadn't planned that slide when they started the project. He added it that same morning, after what he'd been through. "We have two choices," he said, looking the room in the eyes. We can keep using the model as is and trust whatever it spits out, or we can face the biases inside it and pay the price to fix them. People are the same. We also have two hard choices: stay silent or speak up and accept the consequences. Anna watched his face and saw the pain in his eyes, not just as a coworker, but as a person. In her head, she thought, that strong person was once this helpless too. What would you do? You still haven't seen the biggest twist. After the meeting, Lisa asked Halim to come to her office. A folder sat on her desk with late arrival reports, printed emails, and an internal memo from the human rights team. Halim's hands started to sweat. His heart raced. This was his last chance, he thought. If he stayed quiet now, the cycle would never end. Halim, Lisa began softly. I have 3 late arrival reports on you from the past 3 months. I know each one is tied to police checks on your commute. Halim lowered his head, ashamed as if he was the one doing something wrong. But, Lisa continued, lifting another sheet of paper, I also have this. It was an email from Mark, sent that very morning, tagging both the transit authority and the company. It started, Today I witnessed the way your employee, Halim, was treated on the subway. In the body, Mark asked the key question between the lines. Who holds the camera footage of this racist incident? And this is the moment everything turned. I requested the subway camera recordings, Lisa said, from both the transit company and the police. We also noticed a pattern in how often you're stopped. Our human rights unit is getting involved. On that stack of papers, there were words that would change everything. But the really shocking thing was, the police department never opened a formal case file on you, Lisa said. No legal rationale, no documented suspicion, just a routine check flag in their system. And that system prioritizes people based on appearance. Inside Halim, rage and faith collided like never before. One voice told him, be patient. Another screamed, stand up for justice. That night, when he went home, he lay down, covered his face, and prayed again. His tears hit the pillow. God, he whispered, what do you want me to do? But he still didn't know one thing. You think this is all? You haven't seen anything yet. The following week, the company's internal software team and the Human Rights Department launched a joint side project. Funny enough, the idea didn't come up in a formal meeting, but in a casual lunch in the cafeteria. That's when the person who would end up saving him quietly entered the story, someone completely ordinary at first glance. Sophie, a quiet, bespectacled data scientist. While placing a wrap on her tray, she leaned toward Halim and whispered, You know, I can work with data. If we can find publicly available stats on subway checks, we might be able to prove discrimination. We might only get 10 minutes before someone tries to shut it down, but maybe this time, that'll be enough. You won't believe this, but... A few days later, Sophie walked into the office with a report in hand. Look, she said, pulling up numbers on her screen. On these 3 lines, darker-skinned, bearded men are stopped 5 times more often than anyone else. Every answer brings up 2 new questions. I know, but at least we've got a starting point. What about camera footage? Halim asked, his hands trembling. Who's going to show the truth? And this is exactly where everything shifted. Mark stepped in again. He'd told a lawyer friend about everything. That friend linked them up with a human rights NGO. Before going public, they drafted an official complaint. That phrase, he only had 10 minutes or it would all be over, no longer described Halim. It fit the system now, because the truth was about to surface. As security officers started getting closer, the transit authority noticed the media was circling. They quietly opened an internal investigation. Security and police working that line were questioned again. Jonas realized, way too late, that the word routine would no longer be a shield. The voice on the phone sounded familiar, but one evening, Halim's phone rang. Unknown number. He hesitated, then picked up. Mr. Kara, the voice said. This is Inspector Mueller. We're conducting an internal investigation into the subway checks you've experienced. Could you come in and give a statement today?" The voice on the phone sounded familiar, but this time, it wasn't the tone of someone in power barking an order at a suspect. It was someone talking to a victim of injustice. Halim took a deep breath. "I'll come," he said, "but I'm not coming alone." He knew Mark would be there. Sophie, Lisa, Anna. He wouldn't walk into this room alone again. It was too late for silence now. When the door cracked open, what they saw. At the station, when Halim pushed open the interview room door, he didn't just see one inspector. There was also a human rights representative and an independent observer sitting in the corner. On the table were printouts of subway camera stills, logs of stop and searches, statistical summaries, everything laid bare. This is the kind of injustice that could happen to any of us, Inspector Mueller thought privately. Even he had never stopped to question the system. He'd just hidden behind that word, routine. Now, looking into the eyes of this young Muslim man, he saw the vulnerability of someone simply trying to defend his right to exist with dignity. During the interview, Halim told the full story for the first time. Every stop, every stare, every moment of silence. He even described the unexpected betrayal. The coworker who had once walked beside him after a company dinner and later said to someone, "You should keep an eye on him. The police stop him a lot." Must be for a reason. Out of everything, that sentence had cut the deepest. And what was written in that file would change everything. When the questioning ended, Inspector Mueller closed the folder. "This isn't just your case," he said. "This is a case against the system. We've already reassigned the officers who were regularly working that line. Anti-bias and civil rights training is being implemented. And the biggest part, the routine check algorithm is being rewritten." For the first time, a faint, painful, but real smile crossed Halim's face. Justice hadn't arrived all at once. No magic switch had been flipped, but something had started to move. This was the system's last chance, he thought. Either it would change, or someday it would have to answer for what it had done. When they thought everything was over. A few months later, Halim was back on the same subway line, in the same car, at the same time of day. Same bag, same laptop, same pocket Quran inside. Two officers walked in. For a second, his heart jumped to his throat. But the real shock was, this time, one of the officers raised his voice so everyone in the car could hear. "We're conducting a random check determined by a public algorithm. Everyone will be asked for ID in order, one by one." Halim looked around. Everybody was confused. No one was being singled out. No, you, stand up, you, stay seated. For the first time, he wasn't the only one in the crosshairs. One of the officers met his eyes and gave him a small nod. It felt like he recognized him not as a problem, but as someone they now owed a debt to. Everyone knew the truth now, but the real shock. The next day, the company's internal newsletter posted a tiny headline. "Thanks to the initiative of our colleague Halim Kara, our city has launched a pilot program to combat discrimination in public safety procedures." Most people would never see his long nights, the whispered prayers, the tears in the dark, the heavy walks through station corridors with eyes glued to the floor. But he knew. That night, he lay down, covered his face, prayed. This time, his tears weren't only from pain. They came from something new, a sense that his deep hunger for justice and his faith were finally moving in the same direction. He still carried the weight of loneliness on his shoulders, but now there were others who carried a piece of it too. Mark, Sophie, Lisa, Anna. And maybe you just by listening to this story. What would you do? The voice on the phone sounded familiar, but this time it was his mother calling. Thousands of miles away, in a small house in Turkey, the woman who had always told him, "Be patient, my son," but who was now proud of him for standing up for justice. "My son," she said, "I heard that they don't just stop you anymore at those checks." Halim smiled softly. "Yeah, Mom," he said. "Now it's either everyone or no one. It's a little more fair." His mother fell quiet for a moment, then said only this: "That strong person was once this helpless too. But you answered with your faith, not with hate. Don't forget, justice may be late, but when it comes, it changes more than you think." And that's the moment everything truly changed. Because this wasn't just a story about a Muslim man facing racism during a police check. It was about silent stares turning into speaking consciences, about a so-called routine injustice being forced to answer for itself, about a young man whose beard and skin color made him suspicious in one part of the system, while in another part his code was helping to rewrite the rules toward fairness. And you, listening to this right now, might not realize it, but the real question is still hanging in the air. It was the kind of injustice that could happen to any of us. What would you do?